Hey, gang, good to be with you. Welcome, for those watching on video, to my home office slash broadcast studio. If you're listening to me on the weekends or whatever on Sirius XM, this is where I do the magic from, right here, with my wolf in the background and all the books on the shelves, which belong to my wife. Now, if you're just listening to this, you can't see all those things. I'm not going to keep that part going very long, but I wanted to jump in on this topic about the negotiations between Major League Baseball and the MLBPA, trying to come back to play, right? There's the news over the last 24 hours has been about the disagreement between the two sides. And rather than continuing to post 280 character tweets and string together long threads, the easiest way to tackle this in a reasonable way, and the easiest way to tackle this in a detailed way, because there is a lot of detail here, is to just throw this together. I don't have a plan for how long it's going to go. So I'm just going to go, and you guys are welcome to offer up feedback. The easiest way to do that is on Twitter at Kevin Wheeler 94. But you probably already know that, because if you're watching this, it means you probably saw the link that I tweeted out. So either way, thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. I appreciate it. I'm going to keep this as concise as possible. I don't want this to turn into a 45-minute Wheeler monologue, and Lord knows you know I'm capable of that. I want this to be, though, as simple as possible. Because when the owners put out their plan by passing along the details to various national baseball writers, too much of the initial reaction was the players should just accept it. It's a crisis. Anything to bring baseball back. And look, nobody wants that more than me. I mean, I'm the biggest baseball dork on the planet. I want baseball back, assuming it's healthy, assuming it's safe to do, assuming they can figure out all the details. And those things aren't 100% right now. It sounds like things are trending that way, but it's not 100% right now. But I don't want anybody making a bad deal. And I want to be clear that my position on this is not about hating owners or disliking the way things go or the fact that there are owners and employees and all that. This has nothing to do with that. Because what the owners are asking for in asking the players to accept a 50-50 revenue split for the rest of this year, regardless of what players are actually owed. So the players believe they're agreed to just the prorated portion of the salaries they were contracted to receive. And the ownership is now saying, well, we won't have fans in stadiums most likely, which means we're going to have a big revenue shortfall compared to what we projected, and we want this deal to reflect that. And what they're asking for is not entirely wrong. But what I can't take, and what drives me crazy, is this immediate turn on the players and saying, well, they should just take what's offered. It's either this or nothing. And it's not either this or nothing. It's not. That's just not accurate. This is a negotiation. What you got from the owners was their first idea, their first proposal. And the players will come back, and there will be back and forth, and some of it will be contentious, and some of it will be ugly. But there's no point in any of us getting angry about it now. Because it's not going to happen now. There's plenty of time to be angry if this all blows up a potential return. And we'll get to that coming up in a little bit. But I want to be clear, because I'm going to be disagreeing a lot with what the owners have put forth. And I want to be clear. I think that there's an argument that there's truth in there that needs to be addressed. But I want to be clear right up front that I'm not taking a side based on what benefits me, right? I work, part-time at MLB Network Radio in addition to working for Mad Dog Radio. Obviously, in my past time at KMOX, I worked on the Cardinals radio network, did their pre- and post-game show. The owners that I've dealt with in Major League Baseball have primarily been, the DeWitts, Bill DeWitt Jr., Bill DeWitt III, and the rest of the ownership group with the Cardinals, and they're good people. And they treat their players well, and they treat their employees well, and they treated me really well. So none of what I'm saying is about disliking owners. I don't dislike owners. There may be some in other marketplaces that I trust a lot less than others. But if I had a position that I would take that would benefit me the most, it would be to take ownership side. Because there's a lot greater likelihood that at some point during the rest of my radio career, a lot greater likelihood that I will some way, somehow work with a team doing pregame, postgame, covering it, whatever. And in that case, it would be better for me to be on the owner's side and not on the player's side. Look, I bring this out. I don't show this very much because I didn't do anything to get it. But in 2011, this is what the DeWitts and the ownership group for the Cardinals gave to all kinds of people, including people like me on the broadcast team as I was doing radio pre and post game. None of what I'm going to say is about personal attacks on owners. None of what I'm saying here is about being against owners in general. It's about this specific topic. And this, to me, is a critique of their job performance, just like it is when we talk about players who aren't getting the job done on the field. So that's what this is about. I don't hate ownership. I don't hate Major League Baseball as an organization. I do hate the NFL, but this isn't about the NFL. It's about baseball. This is not personal. This is not me having a bias. I was never a professional player. I've never been in the MLBPA. And if they do well, it doesn't benefit me at all. And again, if anything might benefit me at some point down the road, it's much more likely that ownership would be the group that I work with rather than the Players Association. Okay, so just to make that clear, I want to get that out there up front. So here's where my objection comes in this idea that the players should be sharing in the pain. And by the way, they are, and they should be to a degree. But this is the problem that I have at the core of the ask that the owners have put out here. In the worst of times, they want the players to share in the pain, but they don't let them share in the gain in the best of times. Now, don't get me wrong. Players that are free agents can negotiate bigger contracts when there's more revenue. And we've seen that with the big deals that have gone out to star players these last couple of years. But they can't take the contract that they currently have and say, wow, you know what? I had a better year than my contract says. I deserve more money, right? Like Jack Flaherty. Jack Flaherty, vastly underpaid. But he gets renewed because he doesn't have any rights. The team didn't look at him and say, well, he is outperforming and he had a better year than what his salary dictates. We should give him more. They didn't do that. Nobody does that, right? They don't turn around at the end of a super successful season where revenues are up and maybe up more than the owners thought they would be at the beginning and turn around and give every member of the MLBPA a bonus because, hey, it was a good year. Here's some more for you. The players get paid what they are contracted to get paid, and not more. And of course, not less if they underperform based on their contract too. But here the owners want the players to share the pain, but they never turn to them and say, hey, we're going to share when we're having great times too. Now, keep in mind how much revenue has grown in baseball in the last 10 years, right? So 10 years ago, 2010, annual revenue in Major League Baseball was just over $6 billion for the entire sport, and the players made about $2.8 billion of that. So like 46% of the revenues that are measured, and we'll get to more on that in a second too, but of the revenues measures went to the players. Last year in 2019, baseball's revenue was almost $11 billion. It was $10.7 billion according to Forbes. We know that's an estimate. It's probably not right on the money, but it's also not really far off. It's going to be close. And we know what the players made. They made just a hair over $4 billion. So 10 years ago, the ratio was $2.8 billion in salary compared to $6 billion in revenue. Last year, it was $4.05 billion in salary to $10.7 billion in revenue. So the revenues are going up a lot faster than the salaries are. So in other words, ownership in baseball, and this is, by the way, fine by me. I don't care if owners make a lot of money. They should, right? They own the team. I mean, it's their business. That's fine. But they didn't, during this last decade, turn around and say, well, we're making so much money than ever before. Let's give some more to the players that we don't have to. Right? I mean, unless they did that and I somehow missed it. But this is the point. It's a hard sell to just flat out say, things are bad, help us out. And I want to go through quickly how this all moves around, because I don't think that this is either dead right or dead wrong. I think what's going to end up happening and what should happen is the players will move off of their current position a little bit. The ownership will move off their current position a little bit, and they'll find something that's a little bit more conducive to getting a deal done. But at the core of what the first offer was from MLB, it's, hey, we want you to share in the losses and in the pain because we need you to. But when things are at record-breaking levels, we're not going to cut you in on more of that. And that is, to me, a logical hurdle that it's hard to get past. Now, I've had a lot of reaction on this from people on Twitter, friends of mine. I mean, look, you guys think I argue on Twitter. You should hear me argue with my buddies. in our email chains. You should hear me argue with my dad on whatever the topic happens to be. I like to argue. None of it's ever personal. But I get this argument. But the owners take all the risk, right? They have all the risk, and this proves it. Like, no, this is the exception that proves the rule. Like the one time in modern baseball history where they actually went backward because of something that was out of their control. There's no risk to owning a professional sports franchise. What team in modern times sold for less than the original purchase price? Which team loses money regularly these days in any sport, but particularly in baseball, with the TV money that's out there? It's damn near impossible. Now, maybe some teams that are on the lower end in revenue, who maybe go a little higher on payroll in a year because they think they can compete, that team might run into some trouble at times, but nobody loses money every year. And every team sells for way more than it was purchased for. I mean, use the Marlins, man. It's the worst run organization in baseball for a, 10, 15-year period, the entire Jeff Loria era. That man paid $188 million to get the Marlins. He sold it for $1.2 billion. The worst run organization in baseball, in one of the worst marketplaces in baseball, went for $1 billion more than it was originally purchased for. Went for 10 times what it was originally purchased for. Now, teams that were purchased more recently wouldn't go for 10 times, but a lot of ownership's been around for a lot of while, and you will always be able to sell at a number higher than what you purchased at. There's very little risk. Like, the only risk is something like this pandemic that is hurting every business and everyone. It's not just a baseball thing. Let me ask you another question. When's the last time a team was put up for sale and didn't have anyone willing to line up and pay list price or more than list price? I mean, the valuation estimates on the Marlins were not $1.2 billion, but somebody paid it. The Mets are, if they end up getting sold here, you've all heard the stories about A-Rod and J-Lo being interested. They're talking about $2.5 billion for a poorly run franchise that was purchased. I don't remember the exact timing, but is probably 15, 20 years ago when the Wilpons got controlling interest. I think it cost them $400 million to take over full ownership. They were already part owners before that. Let's call it $500 million. They're going to sell for a $2 billion profit if they end up selling the team. So when the games are played coming up, there won't be anybody in the stands, and that's going to be an area where you're not making money. And I understand, again, this needs to be massaged a little bit. But the reaction shouldn't be, hey, players, just take what you're being offered. It's this or nothing. And it's not that or nothing. It's a negotiation back and forth. You know, when the games are played, TV money is guaranteed. I hear this all the time, too. You know, well, the players have guaranteed contracts. They get paid even if they play poorly. Sure they do. They also get paid too little if they play better than their contract. And owners have guaranteed contracts, too. The deals with Fox and ESPN and the regional sports networks, those are guaranteed money. So the owners have as much guaranteed money as players do. Well, more money, more dollars, but just as much guarantee moving forward. And then, of course, the teams all get public money, man. When it's time for a new stadium, when it's time for stadium improvements or infrastructure outside the stadium, they get straight up taxpayer cash or they get tax incentives. I mean, let's not act like owners of teams don't have their hands out when it suits them. I mean, how many major league teams of the 30 actually paid for their entire stadium on their own with no public help, with no money from the city, the county, or the state, with no tax benefits, with no extra bonuses, nothing? I'd be willing to bet zero. A lot of teams have had to finance their own stadium. Cardinals did that. The Giants did that. But I promise you they got some benefits out of it somehow. That's how this works. So they are not it's not like the owners don't get these same benefits, right? Like, I think we have to understand that these two sides are pretty equal when it comes to how they should be perceived, right? We always hear about the risks for the owners. Man, they have very little risk because they always end up with more in the end than they did in the beginning. And that's okay, by the way. This is not a rant against owners making money. I want them all to make a ton of money because the healthier the sport is, the better. And also, when we're talking about risk, who takes the biggest risk if and when sports come back during the COVID-19 pandemic? Are the owners going to be the ones out there traveling back and forth between cities, going to the stadium, interacting with other people? Are they going to be the ones taking some kind of health risk, or will that be the players? I mean, that's the players. So there's risk on both sides here. And the owners long-term risk is basically non-existent. In a given year, at times, if you overdo it or some contracts blow up on you, you could have bad fiscal years. But over time, you're going to win if you own a sports franchise. And I'm talking about baseball, but it's true in the other sports too. Now, here's another part of this. Do we know that the owners are helping each other before they ask the players to help out here in terms of spreading out the pain? Right now, I haven't read it anywhere. Maybe it's happening and it's behind the scenes. They don't want to talk about it. But I mean, I'd like to know whether or not the owners in the richest markets who have been raking in money over the last 10 years. I mean, teams like the Yankees who make $700 million a year in revenue, and that's just the revenue we can measure. There are income streams that we don't ever get to measure. We know what the TV deals are. We know how many tickets people sell. We know what the tickets cost. We can add all that up. We don't know what a lot of other deals are for teams that own things around stadiums. Like, for example, the Cardinals. We don't have any idea how much money Ballpark Village generates or how much it will generate when the second phase is done. And again, that's not a bad thing. We don't normally need to know that, but it's something to consider, and in this case, that second phase is being built. The Cardinals are probably feeling some pain from that because of all of this, because of the pandemic. But I want to make sure that we know that the richest owners who have been pocketing cash, and by the way, again, good for them. That's not bad. It's a good thing. But the Steinbrenners and the Warners and these owners of the major market teams, are they helping bailing out their struggling partners, or are we going to put that help only on the MLBPA? I just like to know that. I don't know one way or the other whether it's going to go. I think another part of this too is, the owners are going to have to prove that they need this help. Like, if I want to say, like, let's just say, for example, I get stupid and I go run up a couple $100,000 in credit card debt. And at the end, I'm like, well, guess what? I can't pay my bills. Do I just get to send out a note to all of my creditors, to, the bank that has my mortgage, to the banks that have my car payment? Do I get to just send them a note that says, I can't pay, sorry? No, I got to prove it. I have to file for bankruptcy and prove that I can't pay my bills. Now, owners don't need to prove that to me or you or anybody else that's covering or watching the game, but they should be able to prove that on paper without any accounting tricks to the players. And I think if they do that, they'll get more cooperation. I mean, one of the things that breeds the distrust is that constant, hey guys, just trust us. We would never mislead you. Well, but we've seen in the past that they would. So I think owners need to not prove it to me or to you. They need to prove it to the MLBPA that things are as bad as they say, that they are working together, like the teams that have had all kinds of revenue increases over the last 10 years, the Dodgers and their $250 million a year local TV deal. Yeah. Teams like the Yankees and Dodgers, in 5 to 10 years, those teams will make $1 billion a year on their own. They're already $600, $700, $750 million a year now. When your payroll is under the luxury tax and your other costs are far lower than your major league payroll, there's a lot of money being taken in by these bigger market teams. So what I'd like to know is, A, are they helping out Tampa Bay, Oakland, the other teams that are they struggling, or are we only asking the players to help out by taking less money? Because again, I think a combination of all of these things is the right way to go. The other thing that's bugged me about the arguments on this, again, from debates with friends to things that are coming up on Twitter, is, that the owners don't have anything to lose. They can just lay down the law and say, fine, you don't want to play? No, you don't get paid. Cancel the season. Listen, man, the owners have every bit as much on the line as the players do. You think the TV partners, you think Fox and ESPN and all of the regional cable networks, you think that they're going to be okay if the owners just want to lay down the hammer here and say, no season, fine, goodbye? Come on, man. They have pressure on this too. And the sport will suffer if other sports come back, right? If the NBA and the NHL come back and finish, and the NFL ends up, getting their own, I guess, this probably start about training camp-ish, or even with some OTAs. But if the NFL is coming back and baseball's not because they couldn't agree, they know how badly they lose the PR battle. Both sides know that. You're losing market share. You're losing revenue that you can't get because you won't be getting the TV money. The owners have just as much to lose as the players do in this. And now they have a little bit more safety net, right? I mean, you have billions somewhere, may not be cash, but you have assets, totaling in the billions in most owners' cases. And players don't have that. But some of them are loaded enough where they don't have anything to worry about either. They could never play another day the rest of their life, and they're good. But they both have a lot to risk right now. Some teams could be at risk of declaring bankruptcy if they don't play at all this season. So keep that in mind, that the owners have every bit as much to lose here as the players do. In fact, they have larger dollar signs to lose than the players do. It may not be larger relative to the rest of their wealth, but one thing that I think we all agree, that people who own teams and own businesses who are billionaires, one thing I think that we know that they don't like is missing out on opportunities to make more money. I mean, they're pretty good at it, right? So, if this season isn't played, you could see franchise values go down for the first time in a long time. Teams might have to be forced to sell or declare bankruptcy. So, yeah, let's not act like this is a one-way street where the owners can grab a great big hammer and bring it down on top of the heads of the players and say, fine, we'll just shut it all down. Even if the owners as a group are going to lose money, and even a good bit of money, if they come back and they end up having to pay the players that prorated portion of their salaries, even if they have to do that, they'll survive it. And they'll be able to write the losses off next year for taxes, and they'll get some kind of big benefit for that. And then, of course, in the future, the revenues will go back up and they'll make up for it again. So I think we need to be more level-headed about this. And again, as I start to wrap this up, because I've probably been rolling on for a while, I haven't been tracking the time, there's no need for any of us to get angry or overreact right now. There's no reason to fire up the panic bus and just start screaming, well, just cancel the season already. Let them negotiate. Why is it a bad thing for the two sides to talk about something they disagree about? Should we not disagree or negotiate because it's a pandemic? I mean, this is normal. These two sides are not, if you think the owners are just going to accept a good proposal from the players at face value, you're crazy. If you think the players should do the same thing, here's the first offer, look at it and just say, yes, sir, and sign, you're crazy. It's not happening that way. If this all goes south, and if they're even able to come back, which we don't know yet, there'll be plenty of time for you to yell at people, for me to yell at people at that time. There's way too much overreaction now. And what I think gets lost in this conversation is people wanting to pick a side because of their own personal ideologies. This should not be about a side. I'm not on the MLBPA side. I'm not on the owner's side. I'm on the side of logic and reason. So logically speaking, if you have a partner, in this case, the Major League Baseball is asking the players to be a good partner, suffer the losses with us. Well, then they should they should benefit from the gains down the road when record revenues are coming into play again. But we know that's not the case, right? We know that over the last 10 years, the players' share of revenue has gone from 45, 46% down to 39%. Well, when that's happening, that means more money available for the guys at the top of the food chain. And again, I'm good with that. I want the owners to make money. The more owners that make money, the more stable the sport is, and the more it can grow and have a greater impact, right? I mean, the health of the sport is important. I want the MLBPA to negotiate. I want them eventually to give in on something, but the owners have to give in on something too. It can't be as simple as I'm the boss, you're the employee, this is what happens. I mean, that's your life. That's my life. That's most people's lives. But the players, they're not just employees. They are the product. They are what is being sold. And don't give me this line of bullcrap that it's the game that's being sold. Really? If it's the game, then why doesn't independent minor league ball generate as much revenue as Major League Baseball? It's not just the game that makes the money. It's these particular players. It's the 750 best players in the world. There's a reason that if you want to put Tom Cruise in your movie, you have to pay him a premium, because anything with his name on it is going to have box office draw. It's not the script. It's not the story. It's not the special effects. It's the star. There's a reason that stars in Hollywood get paid what they do, because they bring an audience. They make money. There's a reason why your Metallica cover band that you like, that can go out there and play all the same songs, made up of the same notes and the same lyrics. That's why they can't charge Metallica prices for a show, because they're not Metallica. Again, you can play the same music, you can sing the same songs. It's not the same thing. Major League Baseball players and NBA, NHL, NFL players too, they are the product. They are not just employees. The relationship is not boss-employee. The relationship is owner-product, right? The talent is the product. They have more say than you and me. We don't have that kind of pull. Now, there are people in other walks of life that have that pull, but most people don't. So don't act like this is that kind of relationship. It is not just listen to your boss. This is the quote-unquote bosses managing their product, and both sides have to give in. I just don't want to hear about owners that are losing money. I don't want to hear about the Cubs struggling with money. The only reason they're struggling with money is because they bit off more than they could chew. Man, they generate more revenue than almost all of the teams in Major League Baseball. Maybe a handful don't generate as much as they do, but they got caught in a bad luck time because they were starting their own TV network because they wanted to make more money, and now that's biting them in the butt. I don't want to hear about that. If I have problems, I have to take care of them. I don't get to turn to someone else and say, this is a really tough time. I hope you can, share some of this toughness with me. Right? All right, I hope that all made sense. I just figured this was a whole lot easier than going through 200 tweets or back and forth, because people will only see one tweet instead of seeing the whole thread, and then you end up with this chaos. I wanted to get out of the chaos. So I'll be doing this similarly here and there. I don't really have a decided schedule that I want to do some of these podcasts or video podcasts. I don't know what you want to call it, the videos and / podcast, but I'm going to do them when things pop up. They won't all be as long as this one. Hopefully they'll be shorter, because I tend to ramble a little bit. But if you want to offer up ideas, things you'd like me to do, I'll eventually bring in some guests and do some interviews on this stuff too. Feel free to hit me up at Kevin Wheeler 94. You guys all be good, and everyone settle down. No need to yell at the Players Association to just take the deal. And there's no need to hate on ownership either. I disagree with what the owners are asking of the players at the moment, but I think there's a middle ground where there should be give and take on both sides. And like I said at the beginning, if I'm going to benefit from being a suck up to anybody, I'd be better off sucking up to owners than I would be to players, because I'm never going to work for a player. I'm never going to be their PR guy or hosting a podcast with them, but you never know. I could be doing someone's pre or post game show at some point. You never know. It happened in the past. It could happen again in the future. You guys stay safe. Be good. We'll talk again soon.